entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
Well, I sincerely hope they're going to be entertained by this episode, Matt.
Yeah, the whole thing would just be completely redundant otherwise.
Yeah,
I
I hope
suppose.
it's going to be entertaining.
Yeah.
So this is our Ridley Scott episode.
Yes.
So this is going to be an interesting one, I think, because we're not necessarily the biggest Ridley Scott fans.
That's fair to say. Yeah.
This episode's mainly come about because it's Gladiator's 20th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
We've split this episode down into 4 films, basically.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be doing Alien, Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, and Gladiator.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. So Ridley Scott, he's actually from my neck of the woods.
Well, this is it. I forget he's British. I don't know why, but he's Sir Ridley Scott, and he's very much British.
I think he's done so many Hollywood films, I think it's hard to remember that he is actually from South Shields.
Yeah. I think one of the things is I've never heard him speak. I don't think I've ever watched an interview with him, or I've never seen him give an awards speech or anything like that. You know, I've never heard him.
He's very private by the sounds of things, which makes him all the more interesting, I suppose. He came from advertising, which I would imagine where his preparation comes from, because he is known to be extremely prepared, brings his films in on budget, either early or completely on time.
Yeah.
He's 83 this year.
Yeah.
But he's still making films at the same, if not quicker rate than he was before. He's been nominated for 4 Academy Awards over his career, most recently for The Martian for Best Picture.
That's right.
And 3 Best Director nominations for Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, and Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
I think he's one that a lot of people probably would like to work with because he does make high quality films. I think that's pretty much fair to say, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite consistently. He's experimented a lot, hasn't he? He doesn't necessarily stay in the same lane as such, especially in genre. Like you can see the films that we're doing today, in the first 20 years of his career, were almost completely different every time.
Yeah. There really is no pattern to his films, whereas other directors you can kind of see whose film it is because they have a certain style. You just can't tell that with Ridley Scott because he jumps all over the place. He's got different looks, different tones, different genres. He does a lot of different things. If you actually look at his list of work, it's all over the shop.
I guess that's maybe why he's got so many films that are considered classics, because they don't copy each other, not necessarily a consistent style. They're all so different that he had the opportunity to make each of them unique.
Yeah, absolutely. Where does your experience lie with Ridley Scott then?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said that we didn't really know much about him. I guess I really didn't. But I think it's been a bit of a turbulent kind of relationship with his films, because I remember, especially with the films I'm going to be talking about today, Alien and Blade Runner, when I first saw them, I think I was maybe a bit too young.
Yeah.
Maybe I was watching them just to tick them off a list and say, well, I've done that, rather than wanting to watch them.
He does have a fair few films on that kind of list, doesn't he? He has at least 3 or 4 where you say, right, well, you have to see that film.
But I must say, watching them this time around, and obviously having now studied films and all the years that I've been doing that kind of stuff, it's a completely different mindset. So I'm actually quite pleased that I've managed to make amends, I guess, because I don't think I've been very fair to his work before. Yeah, no, I'm hoping that this will be a bit of a change. But that's why we did the podcast, really, isn't it? We wanted to watch things that we wouldn't usually watch, or reassess things that we thought before. So
yeah, we wanted to branch out a little bit, which is part of the fun. It's almost homework in a way for us, because in certain ways we have to come to things that we maybe don't like, or well, in certain ways I made it clear in no uncertain terms that I was not doing Blade Runner this week. Because I just couldn't handle that.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can change your mind. I don't know. Probably not.
Maybe.
Probably not.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I'm pretty similar, I think. Maybe I'm maybe a little bit more familiar with him than you are. But I came to him a lot later than I think some people have. I mean, the first time I watched Gladiator was in 2014, maybe. I think we did it, didn't we?
We watched it together.
Yeah, we watched it at university. So it was a good almost 15 years after the film came out.
Mm-hmm.
Alien, I'd never seen. I saw Aliens first.
Right, okay.
that traumatized me. That so I didn't watch Alien for years and years because I just didn't think I'd be able to watch it. But again, very hit and miss, I think, because certain films of his I think are okay, but they're not on my list of ones I would go to rewatch a lot. The Martian, though, when that came out in 2015, I loved that.
It was like a return to form for him, I think.
I could rewatch that endless times. Perfectly cast. I actually watched something yesterday that Susan Sarandon said about him, is that he has actually said that it's the cast. Once he's got that set, he just has complete faith in them and he's just ready to go then.
Yeah.
I think he's very good at casting.
He gets all the better product for choosing his cast so carefully.
Definitely. So, speaking of, should we jump in?
Yeah, I'll just say, as usual, if you want to skip ahead, there'll be timestamps in the YouTube description. Don't blame me if you want to skip over me. I should say as well, after Cloud Atlas and Titanic, I'm a broken man. I'm absolutely destroyed. I am in bed today, everybody. I'm thinking of renaming the podcast Under the Duvet with Matt and Mary, but then I thought that sounds like it could be misconstrued.
Maybe.
Yeah, let's talk Alien. Let's go back to 1979. It feels more modern than that.
Yes, it does.
The whole thing is set in space, and a commercial towing spaceship called the Nostromo, and it's bringing a mineral ore refinery back to Earth. So after waking up from sort of hibernation, hypersleep, the crew of 7 find that actually the ship's system has intercepted an unknown distress signal, and it's altered the course of their travel. And because they're contractually obliged to investigate any sort of signals or
distress,
any kind of things like that, in case it's of intelligent origin, they have to go and investigate it. Long story short, they go to a moon on a planet, and they find a crashed alien ship.
It's very bad, and they shouldn't have gone.
It's silly, isn't it? If they don't do it, they don't get paid, apparently. So one of the crew goes properly in and finds a massive chamber, and there's lots of eggs in there.
Oh, very bad.
He starts poking at the eggs, and then something from the egg jumps out, latches onto his helmet. He's unconscious, and they bring him back onto the ship.
This is just one of those morals, isn't it? For don't touch, just look.
Yeah, absolutely. So long story short, that's the foundation of the plot. The film's in 2 halves, really, up to and after the alien is born and escapes within the ship. The second half very much is the start of a ticking time bomb, really, because he starts to massacre the crew one by one.
Not good.
So in terms of characters, I'll just mention the main ones. There's a few that are literally quite disposable. But you've got Ellen Ripley, who's played by Sigourney Weaver. She's sort of the second in command on the ship. Underneath Dallas, they've all got quite interesting names, played by Tom Skerritt, who's the captain. Other famous names, John Hurt plays Kane, who's one of the engine room operators. And you've even got Ian Holm, a young Bilbo Baggins, playing Ash, who's the science officer. So the first thing that struck me about Alien is the tone of it, really. It's really naturalistic and a lot more grounded than the space films that had come before it or that were happening at the same time, because obviously Star Wars was only 2 years before.
Yeah, it's very down to earth in comparison to that.
It's quite a realistic depiction of something that could have been done very showy and show-offy.
Yes.
The crew themselves, they're just ordinary people. And like I said earlier, they're doing a job. They're just on contracts, living quite ordinarily in this ship after they've woken up. They bicker and they banter. They talk about bonuses and shares and all this. It's just a day-to-day thing for them. And the ship itself is quite slow-moving. It's not like jumping to light speed, and it's carefully landing, carefully docking and undocking. And the other thing I noticed is that space travel isn't depicted as easy at all. It's actually quite technical, dirty, claustrophobic and industrial.
Which seems quite realistic, doesn't it?
Exactly,
actually, when you think about it. If we ever get there, that's probably what it will be like.
Absolutely, yeah. All botched up together and something like that. The other thing I think is interesting, and this will lead into the characters themselves, is that socially it's a difficult environment for them to be in. There are quite a lot of frictions. So Ellen Ripley, you don't think she's going to be the main character in the film, but she does turn out to be. She's kind of this strong, straight-talking, badass character. She explicitly tells the crew not to bring Kane, which is John Hurt's character, and the alien back into the ship as it breaks the quarantine protocol. But she is ignored.
Obviously, never listen to smart women, do they?
It's really important, I think, to the film that the crew don't trust each other.
Mm-hmm.
This way, they're all permanently vulnerable and they never feel safe even when they're together.
Mm-hmm.
Usually you'd have strength in numbers or there'd be some sort of safety and security there, but there's not.
Do you know what that reminds me of? It
Mm.
reminds me a bit of The Thing. This like almost like a paranoia.
Yeah. You get this sense that Ripley is the only one that speaks any sense throughout. She warns that the distress signal sounds more like a warning than an SOS. She tells them not to let the alien in. She tells them to get rid of the alien, but she's always ignored. And there's lots of times where she pushes for the rules to be followed or corners not to be cut, and she is ignored. She's not foolish, and that's important to her survival. There's one other character on the ship, Ash, the one played by Ian Holm, who's the science officer, and he seems to be the one that's always breaking the rules, especially he's the one who lets the alien onto the ship.
Yeah.
And all the way through, so many questionable choices, insisting that scientific discovery should be their priority and that it should be studied and kept and brought back to Earth.
Bloody men.
I know what's going on here. And then not only that, but then the ship's system itself gets more and more resistant. Usually it helps them, it'll clarify on things that are happening. They could type anything in and it'll give an answer, but it starts being quite resistant. It suggests that they're all expendable. It comes quite clear that there's not just one villain here. There's something else going on under the surface. And yeah, plot twist. I've written here, Bilbo is a robo. So yeah, it's not the twist I was expecting, especially when I watched it the first time. So yeah, between the characters, there's already a sort of tension, and that's not really even considering the fact that there's an alien on the ship. So I'm not really sure actually what his whole story arc was meant to be about, because he ends up sort of criticizing all of the crew and humanity in general for being clouded by conscience and delusions of morality and things like that. So I'm not quite sure what Ridley Scott was trying to say, but it's interesting. What's more interesting about the film is the way it's made. In the same way that you don't trust anyone, you also don't trust anything that you see or hear, which I think is great for the fact that there's now an alien loose in the ship and they are trying to get it out of the ship. In particular, I think the use of sound is brilliant, because listening sort of becomes the survival of the characters, if that makes sense. From the very beginning, you get the different sounds of the ship, like clicks and beeps and humming. That's like an ever-present soundscape, which unfortunately is sort of indistinguishable from the sounds that the alien makes as well. So the ship, in a way, is also their enemy. And there's loads of times where sound is used to just trick us as viewers. Sometimes it cuts really suddenly from a quiet environment to a loud one. It's basically a jump scare, but without anything happening. So you feel very tense all the way through. The music as well is very ambient and atmospheric. It's not a grand orchestral theme. It's just eerie.
I think that's why it sits in the horror genre as well. I don't think everybody thinks of it as a horror. Depends who you are and obviously how you react to the film, but definitely has horror elements.
Yeah, it's like a horror film dressed up as a sci-fi film, isn't it? It's just a different way of doing it. The other thing as well, there's some very clever devices literally in the film as well. So there's moments where they're tracking, say, the movement of the alien or things like that, and the devices beep. One of them, it beeps whenever something is moving close by. So even though you can't see it, that feeling that there's something could be right next to you, but you can't see it, is really unnerving. And it's not just a trigger for the characters, it's a trigger for the viewer as well, because as soon as something starts going beep, 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 you go, ah. So it plays upon sound great. It's sonically a very exciting film. The film has two settings, I think. You've got the ship itself, because it's like a vessel for horror, because it's a confined setting. It's full of just corridors, air vents, confined spaces. And I think it's really important in a way that Ridley Scott doesn't explain the full geography of the ship to us, so that we always feel really uneasy and uncomfortable, especially when characters are alone, because we don't have that sense of, oh, well, they'll just run over here and or they can just hide behind this. Like, we don't actually know.
Well, the actual tagline for the movie was, "In space, no one can hear you scream."
You've just read my mind. Yeah.
It literally contained, you can't go anywhere. You're stuck.
But that's it, yeah. So while you've got the ship itself, the other setting is space. And you're right, yeah. No one can hear you scream. And we're given periodic reminders of the emptiness of space. It cuts away just to dead silence and watching the ship just very slowly move across a void.
Which is creepy in itself, isn't it? That's creepy.
They are fully isolated, and I think that's why it works being a sci-fi film, because if this was just a house, sometimes you're just like, well, just get out of the house and run. They literally can't go anywhere. So I think that's really interesting. But similarly, the visuals as well can't be trusted. So anything to do with the camera work and the lighting in particular as well. Like the sound, it prepares you from the very start to keep your eyes peeled. It also plays up environments that have poor visibility, again, where lighting comes in. Foggy, misty, steamy rooms. There's rooms where there's dripping water or darkness and shadows. With every change in environment, you realise you start looking over people's shoulders. Like every time there's, say, a ceiling fan or something that moves and a shadow goes past, your eyes are going looking right at it. So it keeps you as an audience on high alert all the time.
Yeah, he really pays attention to set design.
Absolutely,
And production design and lighting. It's key.
Yeah.
I mean, like we've said, there's no pattern to his films, but the production design and what is in the frame in every film that he makes is extremely important.
Absolutely, and you can tell by the effect that it has on you as an audience member.
Yeah.
Weirdly, in Alien, it's everything that's still and quiet, things that you would otherwise associate with comfort, are just as much of a threat than movement and noises, which I think is brilliant. The last thing I want to talk about is just the design of the alien creature itself, because it's iconic, really. You see it in two manifestations. You've got the egg version and the face hugger. It's the thing that pops out and impregnates John Hurt's face, I suppose. It's just disgusting to look at. What I thought was brilliant is that it's all practical and they've made it almost like a real biological organism in a way. It's got mucus and you can see it's got organs and moving parts, tentacles, and it breathes. And it reminds us of things we are familiar with, like spiders and scorpions and insects. But there's something off about it. And the other version is obviously the birthed alien that comes out of John Hurt's chest. There's something so scary about it because you don't actually really see it all that much. You get the first initial glimpse of the little baby one when it comes out, but for much of the film you don't see it. It's always sort of hidden or shown in very extreme close-up or in the dark. And there's something about the feeling that it's such a formidable enemy. They say you don't dare kill it because they learn very early on that its blood is like acid and burns through layers of the ship.
It absolutely terrifies me. That what is it with aliens and acid blood? Oh, I can't.
So it's an undefeatable enemy, really, and the only way they can get rid of it is to force it out because you can't kill it in the traditional sense. To do the shots where you do see it in full, there was a 6'10" Nigerian man called Balaji Badejo who was discovered by a member of the crew in a bar and thought, "Oh, you'd make this look inhuman." So yeah. And the other thing I think is great as well is that one of the character designers, he was a Swiss man called H.R. Geiger. He died in 2014, but he suffered from night terrors and he would keep a sketchbook by the side of his bed, and apparently that's how the character was originally conceived because he used to draw his nightmares. So
he's basically all over that film, isn't he?
Absolutely.
And he is one of the first names I think that people say when you talk about Alien is him.
Yeah, they sort of defined his career, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alien, aliens, and then some numbers after them. So yeah, obviously there's some really famous scenes where practical effects have been used. Like I said, the bursting out of the chest scene, and the other one is where they realised Ash is a robot and they've beaten his head off. It's a shame, really, because some moments that were the most horrifying are also sometimes the most laughable looking back. But it's one of those things you can't deny that the practical effects are amazing. And it won its Oscar nomination for effects. The only other one it was nominated for was art direction / set decoration, which it didn't win. But yeah, that's my summary of Alien. Don't trust anyone, anything.
So moving on to Blade Runner then, which I kind of feel like these two are quite similar because I associate them both with black. I'm not sure why.
That's the thing. That's what I did too. I just remember them being so dark that they weren't interesting. But it couldn't be further from the truth. Let me just switch my gears over. Right, Blade Runner. Here we go. 3 years later, 1982. It is based on a book by Philip K. Dick called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Funny this. It's set in November 2019, which is obviously very recent, in Los Angeles, but a very dystopian, futuristic depiction.
I'm glad we don't look like that.
Yeah, they should have added a few more decades onto that. Maybe 2020. Just add a month or two. So there is a company called the Tyrell Corporation, They have advanced robot evolution, and they've created replicants, and these are androids who are almost indistinguishable from humans. They are at least equal in intelligence to the genetic engineers that created them, but they are far superior in strength and agility, and they were designed basically to be used for slave labor, for off-world exploration and colonization and things like that. However, it's never good news. Following a bloody mutiny by a unit of off-world replicants, they were then deemed illegal on Earth, and there was a special division of the police called Blade Runners who have the authorization and sort of license to kill in a way to retire any trespassing replicants on Earth. And we basically start the film by learning that 4 replicants are currently in LA and on the loose. And that's where we start the story.
Okay.
Our main character is Rick Deckard, who's played by Harrison Ford. In a role that I think people, I don't know, I kind of forget that he did this. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think because he's got such big roles in other things.
Yeah, franchises as well. Yeah, and he's not playing like a wisecracking dude in this one as such.
No.
He's quite a weary character. So we learn that he's a former Blade Runner. He's not actually Blade running at the time. And he's approached in the street one day and arrested. And he's given no choice. I don't know why. We'll come back to this. But to resume his old post as a Blade Runner. So he's quite a reluctant hero as well. He's quite enigmatic because we don't know much about him. There's an implication that he's divorced, but it's never actually said or explored in the film. He drinks a lot and he is alone most of the film. And again, I'll come back to why I think this is important later on, but that's just about as much we find out about him. The film, in a way, follows 2 strands. So there's him pursuing the replicants, a bit like Kill Bill in a way. He's got like a hit list. He's got to get these 4 people. Well, not people. And the replicants, in a way, have their own story arc because they're pursuing their creator. It's like the hunter is hunting the hunters. It's quite interesting. So the replicants, I think, are really, really, really interesting. They're designed to copy human beings in every way except their emotions. And I think it's got to be said that the actors do a brilliant job here of playing not quite humans. So the 4 replicants that we have were designed for different purposes. The first one that we're introduced to is called Leon, played by Brian James. He's like a strong ox-like buffoon kind of one. They say the only way to hurt him is to kill him, and he's been caught trying to infiltrate the corporation as a new employee. How they determine who is and who isn't a replicant is this sort of lie detector test.
Yeah.
Where they put a camera on the eye of the subject. The Blade Runner initially doing the investigating is actually killed halfway through, and this is how Leon escapes, which is why Harrison Ford is brought in. The other ones, you've got one called Roy Batty. I don't know why they got surnames, by the way. I don't know. Who's played by Rutger Hauer, who's sort of a combat model.
Very defining role for him as well, this one.
Absolutely, yeah. He died last year as well, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
A really, really major role for him. So he's the presumed leader of the 4. He's kind of designed for optimum self-sufficiency, I think they say. Then you've got Zora, played by Joanna Cassidy, who's, I love this, she was trained for an off-world kick murder squad.
It's very specific.
Yeah, talk about Beauty and the Beast, she's both. And then the last one is Pris, played by Daryl Hannah, who I absolutely adore. And she's a basic pleasure model. So she's very good at seducing and acrobatics. So actually, the more I describe this, the more I realise it is quite witty in that sense. But and I've just noticed the film seems even more like Kill Bill now. I've realised Daryl Hannah's in it. So as a failsafe, in case they do develop emotions, they've only been given a 4-year lifespan, which is the reason that they have come back to Earth, really, because they're trying to find the engineer who created them to extend their lifespan.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that they're really violent, there's an element of sympathy for them, because just like us, they've just got the same innate instinct to want to live and survive as humans do, or at least understand themselves and their identity.
Yes.
They say all the time it's painful to live in fear, so it's like, oh god, I feel a bit bad for them. So a bit like when we talked about Titanic, we said the arrogance of man.
Yes.
And even with Cloud Atlas, how everything that we would associate with evolution and technological advancements actually threaten to wipe us out. Same here, the arrogance of the creator to make something perfect, but then use them as slaves.
Yeah.
I think the tagline of this one's important too. It says, "Man has made his match. Now it's his problem." There's one additional character who plays into this heavily. Her name's Rachel, and she's a replicant, but she works in Tyrell Corporation. So when Rick goes there, he's actually asked to administer the test to her. Usually it takes about 20 to 30 questions to determine it. It takes over 100 for him to suss out Rachel as a replicant, but she doesn't know. So he learns here that all these Nexus models of replicants, and they've been implanted with these fake memories, and they've been given photographs that sort of back these up. So they do genuinely think that they're real people. And then bloody blah, he falls for Rachel. It's not really that important in the grand scheme of things. Maybe in the sequel. He sort of falls in love with Herb, so it's a bit of a moral dilemma for him. So what is the film saying, and what are the themes, and how can it be interpreted? It's very basic, really. But what is human, and what does it mean to be human? E.g., if you can look, think, speak, feel like a human, then are you? Daryl Hannah's character quotes René Descartes, and she says, "I think, therefore I am." And I think that sums it up perfectly, because the film's asking, well, if you're not what you think and feel you are, then what are you? And what rights do you have as a sentient being? In the very end, the very famous quote from Rutger Hauer's character, where he says all of the experiences and memories that they have had personally just get sort of lost like tears in rain. And it sort of leaves you on a bittersweet note, really, because it's like, oh, actually, they seem quite nice. The best thing about this is the clues all the way through that Rick Deckard himself is actually a replicant. It's first flagged to us when Rachel asks him, "Have you ever taken the test?" And you think, oh, didn't think about that. There's lots of different things. Like, there's many times in the films where replicants save his life. There's times where he has dreams. In particular, he has a dream about a unicorn, and the guy who hires him leaves a little origami unicorn at the end of the film, as if to suggest that he knows what memories he's got and dreams. The question of why did he not have a choice in being a Blade Runner? Well, arguably, maybe he didn't have a choice. That was his function. Loads of stuff like that. I can't remember what answers we got in the sequel, so I'm taking this in isolation. The very last thing I want to talk about, and I guess it links in with Alien as well, is a sort of a blend of genres here as well. It's sci-fi, but if anything, it reminds me of the sort of noir detective thrillers that Sam Spade, and even Chinatown, and films like that. That's obviously neo-noir. So a lot of the film, he's just finding and following clues, whether it's having things analysed or looking at photographs and tracking people down, and I love that element of it. A lot of the things that you would associate with a noir film, like the lighting and Venetian blind kind of shafts of light, nighttime scenes, they're all visual qualities that are also really good at depicting the dystopian setting as well. So you get these dirty, smoggy streets and things that films like Batman and The Fifth Element and The Matrix copied. And then I'll just leave you on this note that there's all these billboards and almost like megaphone shouted advertisements talking about these off-world colonies being a better life. I just think it's interesting, the idea of this new American dream. It's a promise of paradise, but it's built on slavery. So yeah, good music in this.
Well, this movie, from what I can gain, this is Ridley Scott's what he sees as his most personal and complete movie. Which is ironic because this movie was nearly taken away from him.
Oh, right.
I think it had a very troubled production.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the studio not liking what they saw. But it's Rutger Hauer's favourite of his own movies. It's Ridley Scott's favourite of his own movies. Philip K. Dick said that Harrison Ford has become more Deckard than I had imagined. It's been incredible to watch. So there's all of that involved in it, but then this film came out in 1982 opposite E.T.
Yes, it did.
And it suffered immeasurably. But it's gained this cult status now, hasn't it? Where it's just, it's huge.
I think it's had a lot of different versions as well. It started off having a lot of monologuing from Harrison Ford's character. It had an extra ending added on at one point. It's been tweaked and changed over the years.
But then you think of what it's become.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know.
Yeah, I genuinely think I've converted because I was the same as you. I looked back at it and thought, Blade Runner.
I don't think you did, Matt. I really don't. I think your feelings were probably a lot fairer than mine.
Oh, well, up until I watched it this time again. But every time I'm actually watching it, I absolutely love it. But every time I'm not watching it, it's easy to forget what happens.
Yes.
That it's got more to it than just sort of darkness and stuff like that. But I think the performances are great. I think it's fascinating how they did it. I think Rutger Hauer is absolutely terrifying, especially in the last act where he's the last man standing.
He did a lot of his own. He added a lot of his own lines and a lot of his own interpretations of that. And again, it's like we said earlier, Ridley Scott is known to be a collaborative director, so that he allowed the cast to do this.
I think even those last lines about tears in the rain and stuff, he suggested those. I don't think they were in the script.
He did, yeah,
which
yeah.
is
That's
brilliant.
his own line, yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Well, maybe you can lighten the tone
The
now.
mood.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to a point.
Yeah.
To a point. So, Thelma and Louise.
Very excited to hear.
Yeah. I sent you multiple messages while I was watching this.
Yeah. I was
Completely
nearly
frustrated.
crying. So funny.
Oh, honestly. So, Thelma and Louise, it's two best friends. They are heading out on a road trip, basically, to a cabin or lodge in the mountains to fish and just chill out. Thelma, played by Gina Davis, has a very bullying husband, and she doesn't even ask him. She just goes. Packs an awful lot. Doesn't look like she's going to come back. And then you've got Susan Sarandon, who's a waitress, who is very much, from the very beginning, you can tell she's completely in control of her own being.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because Thelma is so she's been completely contained and whittled down, I would say, by her husband, just chipped away at, and has this horrible existence where she's just in the house, does nothing, can't go anywhere, do anything, that she really does let her hair down.
Yeah.
And gets too close to a man in a bar. And I was watching this going, what are you doing? Have you no self-preservation or safety at all? And Susan Sarandon is very similar to that.
Yeah.
And there is an attempted rape outside in a car park, and Louise has Thelma's gun, which she doesn't actually use herself because she doesn't like guns.
Yeah.
But she gave to Susan Sarandon to keep in her purse, and she gets Thelma safe away. And they're walking away, and this guy says something stupid.
Yeah.
And Susan Sarandon's Louise kills him.
Yes.
Which kind of sets off bad things that just keep spiraling out of control. And you do find out the reason for this later on is Louise was raped in her earlier life, and she will not speak about it. It happened in Texas, and she won't talk about it.
Yeah.
And then things just get worse from there, trying to find out what they're going to do. They meet Brad Pitt, who is astonishingly beautiful in this film. He is just hard to take your eyes off.
Can't look at hairdryers the same.
And he turns out to be a thief, con man. And the money that they get from Louise's boyfriend, Michael Madsen, this Brad Pitt character, steals all of the money, and then they have to resort to armed robbery, and it all starts to spiral out of control.
Yeah.
And Harvey Keitel plays the policeman who is trying to bring them in, basically, but not your average policeman.
Yeah.
He's not trying to prosecute them per se.
Yeah, it's not so much a capture as it is a.
He wants to save them. He wants to help them. Yeah, and at first you're not so sure, but the more you get through the movie, I was just saying, oh, please, just he wants to help. Please just listen to him, as things just get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So this movie, it opens on vast open space. It's colourless, and there's just long road into nowhere, which pretty much is symbolic of the journey, because you are on the road for most of this film. There's a lot of things in here that I noticed. There's a lot of contradictions. For instance, there's a comment right at the very beginning that Susan Sarandon makes to these girls, and she said, you shouldn't smoke, it affects your sex life. And then she goes into the back of the cafe and starts smoking. It's like, there's lots of little things like that I noticed. At the beginning of the film, Thelma very much envies Louise. Copies her. Thelma's very timid. She's not streetwise in the slightest, which is obviously where all of these problems start. She's no idea about self-preservation, looking after yourself, how to act with men. She's very, very naive. Thelma just makes one bad decision after another. Honestly, I'd have shot myself, to be honest, at the beginning in the first half of the film. That would have just solved problems. Because you would think, after the problems she'd had being nearly raped by a man the day before, that she'd have sworn off men for a while.
Right. Yeah.
But no, she's just like a bloody moth to a flame when it comes to Brad Pitt, and you're like, are you serious?
What's really interesting is that the decisions they make, or I should say the mistakes they make, it's a product of how their lives have been up until now,
Yes, absolutely.
Each of them have had a past. Even when you said she tells them not to smoke and then does it herself, it's a case of she's aware of her past and she doesn't want others to make the same, but it doesn't mean that she can't escape it herself, kind of thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Definitely. What I noticed about this film, it's very much everything in the scene, everything you see, it's there for a reason. He's done things a certain way. And yes, a lot of the time you're outside, you're on the road. But for instance, all the scenes in towns, it's very drab, very dingy, very claustrophobic. There was lots of people around all the time and it's tight. And then obviously juxtaposed to that, you've got them out in the open.
Yeah, there's sort of an appeal to it in a way.
Yeah, total opposite.
It's like a get away from society.
Yeah. And not only are you going through this journey, it's a road movie, but you've also got this journey of the characters. They really do have this arc.
Yeah.
And especially Thelma, I think, in particular, hers is huge. Going from this timid, naive woman towards the end, she says, "I believe I've got a knack for this shit." Grabbing guns, holding people up. She finds this strength. Yes, it's not necessary through legal means, but finally, after all of this bad treatment that she's taken over the years, she's liberated.
Yeah, yeah.
And Brad Pitt helps her in a way to do that. When she does her robbery, she repeats exactly what he says in his armed robberies, because he has been, prosecuted for armed robbery in the past. But it's this release that she is just able to be.
Yeah.
There's no constraints at all. And I noticed the further through the film that you get, the shots of them become more close-ups. And it's tight, and it's kind of connecting them together, tying them together.
They start quite differently, don't they?
Yeah,
they're friends, but they're two very different characters.
Yes.
The journey kind of solidifies them.
By the end, they're like sisters.
Yeah, to the point where they're making decisions together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's an interesting film. The first half I hated. Right. I really did, because I just couldn't get on board with the decisions that were being made.
Yeah.
But by the second half, I did warm to it more.
Yeah, you're sort of on the journey then, aren't you, with them?
Yeah. And again, like in Alien, Ridley Scott slyly snuck in a very feminist, badass
of course,
female character. This is all out in the open, this one. You've got two very strong female characters, and that is unheard of for cinema at the time.
Yeah.
And this really struck a nerve with Hollywood. After this film, I watched the 25-year reunion with Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon. It was very interesting, and they said that it really had an effect, whether for good or bad, on people. A lot of people said it was glorifying suicide. It was a man-hating movie, which to a point it is.
Sort of with valid reason in places,
And Susan Sarandon said she had to do this film because there just weren't opportunities where you could work with other women, because you were either in a film with no other women at all, or you were, in competition with the other woman, or you hated the other woman, or blah, blah, blah. There was no collaborative experience you could have with women in films.
There's still not many films like that, is there, really?
There isn't.
Thelma and Louise is kind of almost on its own. It wasn't the start of a trend as such. It was...
No, it wasn't at all.
People refer to Thelma and Louise, They might even refer to themselves as Thelma and Louise. It's kind of that iconic standalone example.
Yeah. But what this film did do, which is really interesting, is it set Gina Davis on a path of actually working for women in film. She's got her own film festival now for women in film. She's very much involved in changing the landscape of the industry.
Yeah.
Basically what she does is getting distribution for women in film, and which is fantastic. And it all came through this film because she wanted more of that.
I think she got an honorary Oscar the other year, or last year, this year.
Yeah,
for her work. She got something.
Yeah. What I learned a lot from that interview was how amazing working with another woman was. That was the main kind of message that you got.
Yeah.
And how Susan Sarandon, to quote, said that Ridley Scott was uncharacteristically collaborative, which seems to be coming across from what we've seen
every
or
film.
read.
Yeah.
He's a very collaborative director. He, like I said earlier, he has faith in his cast. He's very interested in their ideas and what they bring to the movie. He was willing to change the work because of the cast.
There's an extra added opportunity for the actors to give their best performance, because by doing that, he's letting them become the character, not just play a character that was written for them.
Yeah.
With them having some more creative input, do it the way that they feel is best because of what they can bring, not just because of how it was written.
Yeah. Well, I didn't like the first half. I really didn't. But
Can
by
I
the time
read
got
you
to
what you said to me? The best quote.
It was very aggressive.
I don't like Thelma. She's an idiot.
Yes, I genuinely believe she is. None of that would have happened if she had any sense. So yeah, first half, I couldn't get on board with decisions that were made that's kind of set the plot in motion.
Yeah.
But the actual arc of the characters and who they become and the strength, and basically at the end, I mean, they commit suicide rather than settle for going back to a life that they would have to have.
Yeah.
And that's very different. It's the Butch
Yeah.
Cassidy and the Sundance Kid ending.
Yeah.
You don't see them go over. You see them go over the cliff, but it's a freeze frame, and the music's positive. It's not negative. There's this very different ending.
You could say they were driven to it.
They were.
Get it?
They were. Absolutely, very, very, very clever.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic pun. It's sad. It's kind of tragic.
Yeah.
Because it shouldn't have happened. It should not have had to be that way. But yeah, that part of the film worked really well for me. It won 1 Oscar.
Oh yeah.
This film. Yeah, it won Best Writing Screenplay.
Ah, right.
It was nominated for actress for both in a leading role, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Film Editing. But I think it's definitely worth seeing, this film.
I think I'm going to rewatch it quite soon. Just for Brad Pitt.
If not, yeah. Or for the women's performances alone.
Oh, that as well, yeah.
Yeah. Just them two that are in the title. Yeah. So, moving on, we're going to go to Gladiator, which came out in 2000. It is just an epic, isn't it? This is an epic. I think what sets this one apart, and it did at the time, was this is taking you back to the late 1950s, early 1960s, the sword and sandals epic.
Yeah.
That you were used to, the Robe, Spartacus, Ben-Hur, Ten Commandments, those big...
Yeah, they did them in
CinemaScope.
CinemaScope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much in keeping with those films. But obviously it has its own modern look of things, and it uses special effects that just weren't possible in those times. I think everybody knows the plot of Gladiator, but I'll give a very brief. Russell Crowe plays Maximus Decimus Meridius, who is the general of the Roman Legion army, working for Marcus Aurelius, the emperor. And they have just kind of won victory in Germania, and he is ready to go home to his wife and his son. And unfortunately, that does not happen because Marcus Aurelius is dying, and he does not want his son Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix, to become emperor. He wants Rome to go back to the Senate, to the people, and become a republic. And he puts Maximus in charge of making that happen, basically, which doesn't go down very well with Commodus, and he kills his father and has Maximus taken away to be executed. But because he's a Roman general and he's underestimated by the soldiers that take him, he gets away, travels home to find that his young son and his wife have been killed in a very horrible way, and he is sold into slavery and comes to Oliver Reed. It was his last performance. He actually died in the making of this.
It was one of the early versions of reconstructing an actor, wasn't it?
Yeah. They had some more scenes to shoot. And he plays Proximo, who was a gladiator who was given his freedom by Marcus Aurelius years before. And he actually owns slaves now and makes gladiators of them. They go to Rome. These big games are going to be put on in the honour of Marcus Aurelius by Commodus, and no surprise, Maximus becomes this very, very great, well-loved gladiator called the Spaniard. And Commodus comes to know that it is actually Maximus, and he's alive, and goes through the motions of how he's going to kill him, and it goes from there. And it is stunning, this film. It really is. It's epic is the word you have to use for this one. It really is, because it's vast. The shots are full. Every shot's full, either of people or of the Colosseum or vast open spaces. Funnily, actually, because I feel like it's something he does with all of his films. This film opens with these fields of wheat, golden wheat, with a hand
going
and a
through.
vast open space. And he does that so often. He did it with Thelma and Louise. Aliens, another one, like you say, it
He
opened
started in space. Yeah.
He very much likes these big, broad opening shots.
Yeah, that tell you a lot without actually having to show you a lot, I think.
Exactly, yeah, absolutely. Russell Crowe won his Oscar for this film because he's just fantastic in it, and you're with him from the first scene. I am not ashamed to say I bawled my eyes out again at the end of this one. It's just fantastic. What stands out for me in this one, which I'm not saying the others don't, but the music in this film is incredibly strong. And it's Hans Zimmer who did the score for this one, and it is absolutely stunning. It's incredible.
It's the music that I hear when we say the name Gladiator more than the scenes itself. I think of the music.
Exactly, yeah. It's one of those where the music's transcended the film, really.
Yeah.
It's a very long film. It's 2.5 hours, but it doesn't drag anywhere.
Yeah, I found that with a lot of his.
Yeah, you are completely involved in the plot, whether it be with Maximus himself or watching all of the politics side of Commodus and his sister. Their relationship is extremely... It's just wrong.
Oh, this is this is. I remember now.
He's in love with his sister, and it's just...
Someone's got to be.
It's creepy. Every scene that they're in together, there's this tension like is ramped up, and you feel so sorry
Joaquin
for her.
Phoenix is very good at doing characters that are quite clearly messed up. Yeah. Yeah.
You just love to hate him in this. He is despicable. He's a monster in this, and he plays it to an absolute T. He is really good, and I don't like Joaquin Phoenix really, but I love him in this. And there's a lot of well-known faces appear in this. Derek Jacobi, obviously Richard Harris plays Marcus Aurelius. It's filled with people who are either character actors or, in the likes of Richard Harris and Oliver Reed, Derek Jacobi, who are greats from their generation.
Absolutely.
Which adds to the part, because I think all of the old Swords and Sandals pictures, the older figures in the films were always played by, these amazing actors.
Yeah, like veteran actors.
Yeah, that you just, oh my God, it's so and so. And this was exactly the same. Now, this film showed what Ridley Scott could do with effects. They were forced, like we said, to do a lot of reconstructing with Oliver Reed, with him dying through that. And there's only one shot that I think doesn't work.
Right.
Other than that, I think they kind of pulled it off really well. I don't think you would have known otherwise. And I think a lot of people probably don't know that he died during the film.
No.
I don't think a lot of people would realise.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've got the Colosseum scenes, which is huge.
Yeah, quite iconic.
Yeah, they've added a lot of space. I think they used a Colosseum set, I think.
Well, I think the lower half and the first sort of several rows of auditorium, I guess, are real, but then it just builds up digitally.
Yeah, they added it all in, all these thousands of people.
Yeah.
I think it works.
Absolutely.
It really does work.
Yeah.
There's a few scenes where you see characters with a backdrop of Rome. There's a few scenes where Commodus is standing and you see Rome behind him.
Yeah.
Doesn't really work. You can see that he's been green screened onto the front of it. But I think the story is so strong and the performances are so strong. I think for the most part, it doesn't really matter.
That's it,
because
yeah.
you're so engrossed.
Well, he's such a good storyteller, I think, is what we've noticed, really. Like
Absolutely.
you say, you are completely involved. And with Alien, it's maybe more an experience and atmosphere. Either way, you're still involved.
But even so, that's what he creates.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that he's using to do it, you do become engrossed in his films.
Yeah, agreed.
This one, you're engrossed in Rome.
Yeah.
This was a very successful film. I think probably a lot of people would say this is maybe one of their favourites of Ridley Scott's.
Probably,
because
yeah.
I think this one reaches a mass audience,
Yeah.
whereas maybe some of the others are more specific to certain types of audiences.
It was more blockbuster filmmaking. I guess The Martian later on was the same.
Yeah, and it was huge. It had 103 million budget, 460.5 million its worldwide gross.
Wow.
Not every movie was making that kind of money at the time.
Yeah.
That's a big success, you know.
Absolutely.
And what I loved as well is I say this knowing that they've got a second one in pre-production or something.
I don't know how I feel about this.
But it's one of those standalone films, or it has been for the last 20 years at least.
Yeah.
There's nothing else with it. It is what it is. It's a standalone movie, and it's epic. It's fantastic.
It's like another irreplaceable classic, isn't it? And it's the theme again across all of his films. You wouldn't dare remake them. Maybe sequels, but you wouldn't remake them.
No, I don't think you would.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. So moving on from that, then obviously his career in the 21st century since then, I've not watched a lot.
No, neither have I.
Like we said, he's not a director that I tend to go to unless the type of film or the actors that he's cast are people that I'm drawn to.
Yeah.
So I think since that time, I've seen Robin Hood. It's another Russell Crowe casting, and it was okay. It was all right. And I've seen Exodus, Gods and Kings, which I did quite enjoy, actually.
I love Egypt. Anything to do with Egypt, so I like that.
I really thought that worked. And again, production design in that one was spectacular. This one didn't do very well, though. It flopped. I'm not sure why, to be honest. I liked it.
I don't know. I kind of get it. It was impressive visually, but I don't think it was carried by the kind of acting.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because the whole Moses story, I love that.
Yeah, we love the Prince of Egypt, don't we? So
yes, we do. Yes, but the big one for me, though, I've not seen his most recent ones, All the Money in the World or the Alien, Prometheus or Covenant.
Well, I'm committing to watching all of them now because I've wanted to watch Prometheus. Got a lot of talk, and some people really love it.
It was on both sides, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm excited to see that, and obviously Covenant after that. But I feel obliged to watch 2, 3, 4 as well.
Yes,
I have seen 2 before.
I think you should. I've seen all 4, I think, and 3 and 4 are very, very forgettable. I don't really remember them at all.
I think that there's a reason they don't get talked about.
Yeah,
but I'll do
and
them.
he didn't do them. He didn't make Aliens either. He did his first one and he moved on. He didn't want to be involved in the making of the others.
Yeah.
But I think the film for me, which it's hand in hand with Gladiator, because I'm not entirely sure which one I like more.
Okay.
I think I would probably go. Gladiator would maybe just come in a little bit under because of its length, because it's not one I would go and rewatch lots of times because it would take ages. So which is the same view I have of Titanic. Titanic was like my favourite film, but I don't rewatch it very often because of its length. But The Martian that he made in 2015 with Matt Damon, I absolutely loved. That is such good fun. It's just brilliant.
It felt like a return to form for him.
Yeah, and again, his casting is just phenomenal. Matt Damon just is completely right in that part.
Yeah.
And that was nominated for 7 Oscars, including Best Picture.
Absolutely.
It didn't get a Best Directing nomination, which I can see why. Its achievements were more in production design, visual effects, sound, screenplay even.
Quite often, even with people like Spielberg, sometimes they're too good at directing that their style is invisible.
Yeah, you just don't see it. Yeah, I think Ridley Scott's one of those. I really do.
Yeah.
He's just, like we said at the beginning, you're going to get a high quality film because he's good at what he does. But a lot of the time, you're so involved in the actual movie, the directing just, you forget all about it.
Yeah.
He's 82, I think, now.
Yeah,
he's
he
83
is.
at the end of the year. And he's still going. He's not stopping or slowing down in any way.
Good on him.
So he's got 3
Yeah.
announced projects,
Mhm.
one that's filming and a TV series in post-production.
Yeah.
I mean, for an 82-year-old, that's he's definitely not resting on his laurels, is he?
Yeah, he's an all-round cinema man. Don't know how else to put that.
Absolutely.
First in line for Gladiator 2.
Yeah, maybe not.
Ha.
So I'd say this has been a success then, because
Yeah.
this is the first episode we've done that's not been as personal, I think, as some of the others
Yeah.
that we've
The
made.
others we've kind of managed to find a personal spin.
Or we've picked them specifically for a certain reason, whereas this one fell very much because of the anniversary. But I'd say it's been a big success, really, because it's opened us up to his catalogue of films more than we might have done before.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good.
Fabulous.
Well done.
So, you had a bit of news for us this week, Matt.
Yeah, I'm going to reintroduce the news section, but it's going to be quick fire news because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So, cue the news. One thing we forgot to mention the other week is that the Oscars had an announcement.
Yes, they did.
They have merged, finally, sound categories, so mixing and editing is now just best sound.
Great idea, I think.
I think so.
Good decision.
No one seemed to know. Even the members of the Academy didn't seem to really understand the difference. It was just complicating it.
Yeah, definitely the right decision, I think.
100%. They also said that they're going to consider on-demand releases for the 2021 ceremony.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense not to, I don't think, at this point. They'd be shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, I don't know yet what that will look like in terms of quality of films or even from what platforms, it's going to be coming from. So it's all very open, but they said for as long as there is a disruption that they're going to do.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. What else have we had? Tom Cruise is apparently going to be shooting a film on the International Space Station.
Absolute madness.
I mean, I think he's run out of things, Earth-based.
Yeah, I haven't done this yet.
Yeah, what haven't I done?
If it was anybody else, I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but I think you just do. Yeah, it's Tom Cruise.
He's going to
sounds
push
about
any
right.
boundary that you can find, I think.
Yeah, which in a way is good.
Yeah, there's no details as such on that, but it's interesting. I'm sure he wouldn't have announced anything if he wasn't serious.
Yeah, exactly.
We've also found out that The Hunger Games will be getting a prequel based on the novel that's out on the 19th of May, called The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and apparently the hero is a young President Snow. So
I'm
we'll
just
see.
not interested in this.
I love the Hunger Games series. I think it's one of the best franchises we've had this side of the 2000s.
I would have to go back to it, I think.
I don't know what. Obviously, we don't even know what the story is of the book, so it might be something that's me. I believe they've got Francis Lawrence back on, who directed most, if not all, of the other ones. I think.
Yeah, I think
so
he did.
I'm hoping that he knows the world and the source material enough to be able to translate it, and that they'll do something really good. I love the idea of the Hunger Games. A little bit of news: Whitney Houston biopics in the works.
Now that will be interesting.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know who on earth will get to play her, because who could play Whitney Houston?
I don't know. They're going to go Jennifer Hudson, aren't they? Someone like that.
Oh God, I bloody hope not.
Screaming the whole way through.
If they do, I'm not seeing it.
We'll see. We'll see.
I don't think I could deal with that.
They've announced a Space Jam sequel called A New Legacy.
Again, is it needed though?
Probably not. No. Rehashing it a bit with a new basketball star. What else? Taika Waititi has been confirmed to direct a new Star Wars film. The track record of directors staying on board is a bit, so we'll see what happens.
Needed?
No, probably not. I thought
At
we
the
ended
minute,
Star
I think
Wars.
Star Wars is Star Wars. I think is completely drained out. Nobody has the energy for it right now.
Not for films. Live action Hercules is in the works.
Yeah, I'm moderately excited for this because I do like Hercules.
Yeah, they've mentioned trying to do something different, like the story that you know, but with a twist, or with twists.
As long as Danny DeVito is back playing Finn, I'm quite happy.
I think
for
there
them
might
to
be
carry on.
mass uproar if he isn't. It would make sense.
As long as he's back, I'm quite happy for them to carry on.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it. The only other thing is another coronavirus related thing, and that's about Cineworld and Odeon refusing to screen the Universal films.
Oh yeah, this is going to be interesting.
It seems a bit petty. I kind of get it, but it does seem a little bit petty at the moment. I hope it'll just blow over by the time everything's back to normal.
Yeah, I don't think obviously Universal have made certain decisions about streaming movies, but to be honest, I mean, I think it's a wise move because obviously they are a business and they need to continue
Yeah.
as a business. This allows them to do that. And also, yes, okay, it's all probably a decision around money, but this is allowing audiences to see movies, and
Yeah,
that's the
at the moment.
important thing.
Yeah.
And I think to go where Cineworld and Odeon and the AMC theaters in America have gone, saying that they're not going to show any of their movies, I think is ridiculous, because at the end of the day, they're not bloody open at the minute. So how are people going to see the movies in the first place?
Yeah.
If you want movies to carry on, which at the end of the day, movies are an extremely important medium. And right now, with things that are going on, there's not a lot people can do. And movies are an uplifting medium.
Lots of people turning to films that wouldn't usually, I think, at the moment.
Exactly. It's so important in people's mental health and their well-being to have things that they can turn to for comfort and entertainment. So to make a decision like that, I think, is ridiculous.
But yeah.
I think it, like you said, petty.
A bit backwards.
Very, very petty. So
Yeah.
hopefully it will all turn around eventually. But I have a Cineworld card, and I was very upset to see that they were making a decision like that.
Yeah, and it will be a very different landscape when everything's, I say, back to normal, back to how things were. So yeah, I don't know. Well, I wish I'd left it on a. Did I mention there's going to be a Hunger Games prequel? Left on the bad news one there at the end.
Well, we do have a high note though, as we still need to give our recommendations for this week.
Yeah.
So,
do you want to go first?
What is your? I'll go first.
Yeah,
yes,
you go first.
Then I'll go first for once. I always ask you.
All right, Mary.
So I'll go first this time. So my recommendation this week, it was a 3-way tie for a while because I didn't know what I was going to do, and then right at the last minute, changed my mind completely and went with something completely different.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with The Boys, the Sherman Brothers story, which is actually a documentary. It's on Disney Plus at the moment, and it is about Robert and Richard Sherman, who wrote the music for Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, all of which I've watched this week, and were the ones that I was really confused as to which one to recommend. But I've decided I'm going to go with this instead. Really, really fascinating documentary about their start and how they came to writing music, and their relationship with Walt Disney and how strong and how much that affected them. And the relationship with each other, which was really disappointing to hear that they didn't get along at all. It was a very hard relationship, very strained, filled with tension. They were very different people. And I mean, Robert Sherman since died, but this came out in 2009, so a good 11 years now. And he was alive at the time, and they are both interviewed in the film, and it's actually made by their sons. One of each of their sons, who didn't know each other growing up because they didn't speak outside of their work.
Oh, that's not.
They
sad to hear
knew
that,
each
actually.
other as it is. Consider the music that they've made. This amazing music that has transcended movies and it's just its own thing.
Some of my favourite parts in Saving Mr. Banks is when you get the glimpses of them working and not necessarily together, but just the stuff that they produced, and so that's sad to hear.
It's very bittersweet, but it's worth a watch definitely, because you just see the magic of them. Absolute geniuses at work.
Yeah, no, I'd really like to see that.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's on Disney Plus at the moment. If anybody's got access to watching that, it's definitely. worth a watch.
I really want to watch that.
Yeah, The Boys, the Sherman Brothers story.
Very good. It's our first documentary.
Yes.
I don't see why we can't.
I do like the odd one. Yeah. What's your recommendation?
Well, again, I feel like I'm just dragging the tone down. I should have gone first. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I was trying to think, what could I tie into Ridley Scott? And I thought, well, he blends a lot of genres together. So I thought, well, I'll go with a film by Danny Boyle. In fact, it's his first film. Called Shallow Grave. I don't know if you've seen Shallow Grave.
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
It's an experience.
I know about it.
Yeah. So obviously, if people don't know Danny Boyle, obviously he went straight on after this to do Trainspotting, 28 Days Later, Slumdog Millionaire, 127 Hours, Steve Jobs, Yesterday, loads of stuff. But I chose this, because it blends genres. It's kind of like a black comedy and a crime film, and in ways it kind of turns a bit horror-ish, on the level of people, not monsters. So it stars Ewan McGregor, also first film, Christopher Eccleston, who obviously went on to be known for
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who, and Kerry Fox. So they were all relative, or if not completely unknowns in the film world. They're three friends and flatmates, and they're interviewing for a fourth tenant. After they select someone, very soon after he moves in, actually, they find him dead in his room.
Oh, fab.
With a large amount of cash. And no explanation of what it's there for. I won't say very much at all, but there's a lot of rifts.
Do they make the wrong decision?
They,
by any chance?
They all have very different ideas of what they should do, not just with the money, but with the body. And there's pressures from outside as well, because men turn up who the money belongs to. And you can see psychologically the breakdown of them as individual characters, but between them as well.
Yeah, I have heard it's a very strong movie, both,
Yeah.
like as a directorial film, but also from performance-wise.
Yeah.
I have heard a lot of good things about it.
I mean, it takes some extremely dark turns from where it starts off to where it ends, but it's fascinating to just see how the relationships deteriorate,
spiral.
Yeah, and how their dynamic changes so much as it just descends, and in the end,
Well, I might have to give that one a go.
I don't even want to tell you what happens, but yeah, they get particularly nasty with each other.
Oh, lovely.
So yeah, that's called Shallow Grave from 1994.
Fabulous.
I've known it for a long time. I really like it.
I will have to give that one a go.
Yeah,
it's on the list. The very, very, very long, extensive,
the decade-long list that we have.
That I have. Yeah,
yeah,
it's definitely on it.
It's on there somewhere.
Yeah. So, Matt, where can they find us?
Where can you find us? You can find us on the CineChat website, www.cinechat.co.uk/podcast, or on any social media or listening platform that you can think of, probably, including Google Play. Now we're on Google Play. Just search for CineChat Podcast, CineChat Pod, CineChat_official. But you can also email us at
podcast@cinechat.co.uk.
Woohoo! Awesome stuff. Right, next time then.
Oh, right. that was a very excited giggle.
For
a good reason. Very
contained
good reason.
It quite well though as well.
Yeah. So our next episode is Julia Roberts.
Yes.
And it is for the 30th anniversary of Pretty Woman, which, if you know anything about Matt at all, is his favourite film.
By a long stretch. Absolutely.
Yes, by a long stretch.
It's the most perfect film ever made.
You're a little bit of a fan of this one. And also, this year's the 20th anniversary of Erin Brockovich. Also a fantastic film, which has one of my favourite quotes of all time, which I won't tell you in this
I know the one it is, though.
Make you wait. Yes, just love it. So yeah, we're doing a Julia Roberts episode in which we'll be talking about, obviously, both of those films in depth, but also talking about her career, all of her classics. I mean, she's just she's just fabulous, isn't she?
Absolutely.
I'm really excited for this one.
Yeah, me too. Maybe a quiz or two. Ooh.
Yes, I think we'll have to have a quiz for this one.
Absolutely.
And we'll probably have to ask the listeners as well what their favourite Julia Roberts film is, because I'd love to know.
Yes.
So yeah, very exciting. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So it's bye from me.
And it's bye from me.